Some of the most fun star objectives in this game can be found in the smaller galaxies. While they may not be as mysterious or as interesting as the secret stars in the previous titles, I think the way they were implemented in Mario Galaxy better fits with the theme of the game. Despite a few of these objectives feeling like they could have just easily been included in one of the larger galaxies, some of these small galaxies actually could have had the full 6 stars. They also complement the game in various ways. A few of them will have taken a gimmick that you did in the larger galaxy and applied it into a smaller and more focused challenge, while others can serve as a fresh change of pace, and provide a unique type of platforming challenge that may not necessarily feel like it belongs in Super Mario Galaxy. The point is that for the most part, while I think the 15 large galaxies served as the primary focus of the game, as if they're the main course of the meal, the smaller galaxies are basically the sides that would take it from being a simple meal to a golden 3-course experience. Including the purple comet stars, the 15 main galaxies would bring you up to 92 stars total, which means you'd have 28 remaining to get you to that 120 count. 16 of those small galaxies can be spawned by the Hungry Lumas outside the domes, or the green stars, as well as the Bowser and the Bowser Jr. stages. Those will be covered in a later segment. The remaining can basically be found as you go through the domes. Well, one of them is the very first star that we collected. Those remaining stars in those small galaxies are the ones that I would like to go through today. For each small galaxy, I want to analyze a few things, specifically in relation to the difficulty of those galaxies, as well as how well they complement the large galaxies in the domes they reside in. This is obviously in addition to the actual challenge itself and how well the small galaxy was built. The first one's easier enough, and I kinda covered it in a previous segment. After meeting Rosalina early on, she'll send you over to a planetoid where you have to collect 5 pieces of a launch star. Then you get to a planetoid where you have to defeat all the Goombas to find the one that has the key to free the Luma. And then same idea, only this time you gotta defeat the giant Goomba, take the pipe maze to the inside of the planetoid, run around, make all the floor panels blue, and collect your grand star. I have no issues with this, it's basically an introductory segment just to get you used to controlling Mario in this unique game. Now here is where the fun actually starts. Some of these might be slightly out of order, I'm just going in the order that I played them in. But the first small galaxy in the Terrace Dome is Loop-de-Loop Galaxy. The star title is Surfing 101. It's a figure 8 track. A motion control tilting star. I'll tell you guys this from now, I pretty much love every one of these stars. I think they were very smart to separate them from the primary stages. Some of the gimmicks might have snuck in a few areas, but for the most part they limited them to the small galaxies. I liked these back when they were on the Wiimote, and I like them when I'm revisiting it on the Switch. It just feels like a fun change of pace, and while I may understand why some people may feel like it's completely out of place for a Mario title, for me I think the fact that they gave us so much of the game without these gimmicks makes them a lot more fun as added challenges. And in addition to that, while a few of them may take a few tries to get used to, as far as I'm concerned when I'm playing it, I feel like it's a fresh change of pace, and given how everything else was so easy, I felt the focus that I had to put in for some of these segments made the game a little bit more enjoyable. Loop-de-Loop Galaxy is as simple as it got for me, again, at least for this playthrough. I'm pretty sure it took me a few tries to get used to it in my previous playthroughs. But for all intents and purposes, it was probably a lot more exhilarating than the 2 large galaxies that I had just played, which made me appreciate the star all the more. The second one in here is Flip Switch Galaxy. This honestly just feels like a challenge that could have appeared in another stage as a hidden star of some sort. It honestly feels like a secret area challenge that you would have found in Mario Sunshine. The OG Super Mario Bros. Backdrop just makes it all the better. In the same way that Loop-de-Loop gave you a fresh challenge using motion controls, this one gives you a pure platforming challenge that feels like it doesn't belong in the first 2 stages at all. It's got one of those random, why is this here vibes to it. The kind that I feel like most fans of Galaxy like to comment on. It doesn't really fit in with the story or the setting of the game. But seeing as how this exists in a galaxy that had Good Egg Galaxy followed by Honey Hive Galaxy, I think a platforming challenge like this was much needed, and for me, it was very enjoyable. Once again, it was pretty easy, but I mean, it could have been easier. And I think along with Loop-de-Loop Galaxy, it makes the terrace feel a lot more diverse and, personally, more enjoyable. While these 2 small galaxies are beginner small galaxies, unlike their counterpart stages that exist in the same terrace, they are at a difficulty level that I feel like is a lot more in line to how difficult an early stage for a Mario game should be. So by that metric, I think they do an excellent job complementing the 2 stages in this terrace, and I think they were great early small galaxy challenges. Next we enter the Fountain Dome, which contains Space Junk Galaxy as well as Battle Rock Galaxy. These are still very easy early levels in the game, but they are a minor step up in difficulty of what came before. So let's see if the 2 small galaxies follow that same pattern. In the previous dome, the motion control star was in Loop-de-Loop Galaxy. Over in this one, it's in Rolling Green Galaxy. The objective is titled Rolling in the Clouds. In the previous segment, I basically went through what was the final challenge of this same objective, the gimmick of standing on a ball and rolling it into a hole. This is fun for multiple reasons for me. For starters, it's harder than what we did in Loop-de-Loop Galaxy. Everything I praised there about the challenge and getting used to the motion control, that all applies here as well. But it's even harder, and for me that makes it even more fun too. But it has the added bonus of the goofy music, the fun golf course aesthetic, and really just the all-around happy vibes in the sunshine. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this star was the first one that I actually lost lives in this game. But it wasn't even that terrible, it was just a matter of getting used to the sensitivity. For what it does, I think it does it very well. But there's always the added caveat of whether or not somebody actually thinks this belongs in a Mario game. And I don't know, I feel like this belongs just as much as any other gimmicky challenge in the game. It's a lot of fun, it's a good amount of difficulty, and it's got that classic gaming frustration that for whatever reason, I absolutely adore. That being said, it is not the hardest challenge. I think I lost maybe 3 or 4 lives on it, but compared to everything else that was around it, it might as well be the final boss battle. In the same way that Rolling Green took what was done in Loop-de-Loop and made it a little bit more harder with the motion controls, Hurry Scurry is the next step up from Flip Switch Galaxy. And similar to Flip Switch Galaxy, Hurry Scurry doesn't exactly feel like it's consistent with the entire game. I mean, at least they made the background consistent this time. But for all intents and purposes, it's just an awkward platforming challenge floating in outer space. But that awkward platforming challenge is thoroughly needed in this dome. And honestly, this feels like something you could have found in Space Junk Galaxy anyway, so it's not even that out of place. This is a pretty typical star. You gotta run along the path while the floor disappears every time you step on it. The final area is the easier version of the hidden star that we did in Sea Slide Galaxy. Come to think of it, I don't know if it's really fair to say this one is harder than Flip Switch Galaxy, but I think they are about on par, and both of them were welcome additions to the domes they resided in. And so far, we're 4 for 4. And honestly, those 4 stars were some of the most enjoyable ones of the game up to that point. But in fairness, that's coming out of the mouth of somebody that drastically prefers platforming challenges above everything else in the Mario game. Next, we move on to the kitchen. While I felt Beach Bowl Galaxy wasn't really that much of a step up in difficulty from what came before, I felt Ghostly Galaxy was a larger step forward. And the same could actually be said about both of the small galaxies as well. There are actually 3 stars here amongst the 2 small galaxies, which means by the time you're done the kitchen, you'll have 8 out of the 12 that we're covering in this segment. So at the very least, I can say that the first 2/3 of these stars not only have a good difficulty curve that is probably better than the one that was implemented in the 5 larger galaxies, but almost all of these 8 stars are some of the most fun of the first half of the game so far, both from a creativity factor as well as a challenging factor. The first one here is Bubble Breeze. The title of the objective is Through the Poison Swamp, and if I'm not mistaken, this is the introduction of the pointer gimmick that involves pushing a bubble around. I believe it's the one that we will see again in Gold Leaf Galaxy. Similar to Loop-de-Loop, as well as Rolling Green, I imagine a lot of people dislike this strictly because it involves some kind of motion control gimmick, or in this case, pointing gimmick. And similar to those ones, I don't mind the use of this at all. If anything, I like just how much effort they put into this challenge. You have to push your bubble through the wind, avoiding the spikes, being cautious of some pretty tight turns you gotta make, all the while collecting the segments of the launch star. This requires a lot of focus, a lot of patience, a lot of concentration. It can and will probably frustrate you, but I think it is a very enjoyable challenge to master. And likewise, I think the better you get at controlling it, the more fun it gets. And you are going to have to get better at controlling it, because when you get to the second half of this challenge, it gets a lot harder. I'm talking doors blocking your path, more spikes in the way, more gusts of wind pushing you in directions you may not want to go. But if you're careful and you're patient and you know what you're doing, you'll eventually make it to the star. Which would then take us on to Buoy Base Galaxy, which is the first one of these things to feel like it could actually be one of the larger galaxies. I mean, heck, this is almost as fleshed out as something like Beach Bowl or definitely Sea Slide. Also, there are 2 stars here. The first one is the Floating Fortress. And there isn't really a gimmick here. You gotta figure out how to get to the top. You might notice all of the platforms that are underwater, as well as one of the gear modes hinting you towards finding something underwater. And when you get down there, you'll notice a bunch of shells and some torpedo bullet bills that can chase you into cracking them. One specifically is floating by the propellers, and once the bullet bill hits that one, it'll bring the platforms up. I believe that one contained a counterweight of some sort. And then yeah, at this point, it's just a basic platforming challenge going upwards. It's not really a pure focused one like Flip Switch or Hurry Scurry. It's more like a typical 3D platformer style one. You'll have thwomps you gotta worry about, bubble shots and top men that can send you downwards, rotating platforms and obstacles and enemies along your path, and fairly narrow confined areas that you gotta get through, all the while being fairly careful while you collect the 5 pieces of the blue star. Like I said, despite not being a pure platforming challenge, it is a very focused one, and will require your best control of Mario. I mentioned this a few times in the earlier segments, but my gauge for how easy the game should be at minimum is what we saw in Freeze Flame Galaxy. And this star is absolutely a star that would meet that criteria. Heck, it might be more difficult than some of the stars in Freeze Flame Galaxy as well as the stages following it. That was the case with Flip Switch and Hurry Scurry as well, but the difference is since this one feels like it's an actual stage rather than just a pure platforming gimmick, I feel like the comparison is easier to make here. Basically, once you get all the pieces of the pool star, you're able to go up to the object in the sky, crack it open, and collect your star. The second star is technically a hidden star. A hidden green star to be exact. And this is actually the only small galaxy to contain a hidden green star, since the first two were collected in the larger galaxies. And again, I'm going to cover all the green star stuff in the next segment anyway. Now, in the case of this green star, take everything I said in the first star, and basically amplify it just a little bit more. I personally find this hidden one to be more difficult, but I think some others might find the first one to be the bigger challenge. Keep in mind there's no hint on this one, so there is an element of searching. Realistically speaking, however, when you dove underwater for the first star, you noticed the pipe maze that was hidden behind the cage. Once you're able to get the bullet bill to crack it open for you, you gotta get these bullet bills to follow you and release the green star. The reason I say this one might actually be a little bit more difficult is because these dumb bullet bills kept running into each other. Not to mention, if you fall into the water, you go back into the main area and you gotta swim back to the pipe maze. Believe it or not, I died due to hit damage. I think the best way I can describe it is that this one is a simpler challenge, in the sense that the concept itself is simpler, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's easier one. But all in all, I think what we see in Bowie Galaxy lives up to what we saw in all of the large galaxies of the game so far. Then heck, it could easily live up to all of the challenges in the later stages as well. This challenge might take place in the kitchen, which is only the third dome of the game, but it easily could have taken place in any of the 3 later domes as well. But keep in mind, the 3 later domes only had a single small galaxy each, so we only have 3 more of these to go. So let's continue on over to the bedroom dome. The only small galaxy that exists here is Honey Climb Galaxy. It's more or less a B Mario wall climb. Now, for this one, I'm not sure if I've just gotten pretty good at it, but I found it to be pretty simple. I do think it's a fun B Mario star, if that counts for anything, but compared to the challenges we faced in the previous small galaxies, I think this one was a little bit underwhelming. But that's me strictly speaking from a difficulty angle. The actual galaxy itself and the challenge that it provides is fun enough. Like, I wouldn't go out of my way to say it's boring or unimaginative, but this easily could have been the final star in Honey Hive Galaxy, for example. Or, since we're in the bedroom dome, this could have fit in with Gusty Garden Galaxy. I liked Gusty Garden Galaxy. I felt like Gusty Garden, in addition to Ghostly Galaxy, were a step up of everything that came before, but they were just short of Freeze Flame Galaxy when it comes to what I would consider a good starting point for this game. And I actually think Honey Climb Galaxy is in line with that. But also, this might just be me and others might find this one absolutely ridiculously difficult, but I doubt it. And I will admit that the second half can get you if you're not paying enough attention. But that being said, considering this is the bedroom dome and it already contains Dusty Dune Galaxy and Freeze Flame Galaxy, I don't think Honey Climb Galaxy is that offensive. There's enough of a challenge in those 2 large galaxies, and Gusty Garden, in addition to Honey Climb, can round out the galaxy. This might be my least favorite small galaxy of the bunch so far, but I wouldn't go out of my way to say it's a terrible galaxy, or even a bad one at that. I like it. It's just my least favorite. But don't you worry, because the next 2 are pretty awesome. Bonefin Galaxy might actually be the best boss fight in the entire game. This one takes place in the engine room, and I think it drastically makes up for the disappointment that was Sea Slide Galaxy. Heck, this probably should have been a boss fight in Sea Slide Galaxy. It's a fight against Kingfin, one of the most menacing looking enemies in the game, and they do such a good job setting up the tone for it too, from the spectacle of how you arrive into the stage as well as the way the camera pans from the inside of his mouth. You basically gotta grab some shells and fling it at him, but it's a lot easier said than done. This is made worse after you strike him because you'll have a bunch of bone fins swimming after you. And they'll actually throw you off. You might take a shell and fire it and one of the bone fins might take the hit for it. All the while you gotta make sure you got good aim and keep track of your air meter. I'm not going to go out of my way to say it's the hardest challenge in the game, but considering how easy most of the boss fights in this game were, this one definitely stands out. I'd say along with Bouldergeist, these are the two best boss fights in the game. And that's based both off of the gimmick of the fight itself, as well as the challenge. Simply put, similar to all of the previous small galaxies aside from Honeyclimb Galaxy, Bonefin Galaxy is amongst the best missions in the game up to this point. And it's going to get even better because next up is the Matter Splatter Galaxy. This one sits in the final dome, which is the garden. And it borrows the gimmick that was used in Ghostly Galaxy's Hidden Star, which might actually be one of my favorite gimmicks in the entire game, which obviously makes this one of my favorite stars in the entire game. And I don't think I'm alone on that. I've heard this one get a lot of praise. And the best part is the name of the objective is appropriately named Watch Your Step. I also like how they shift the camera angle too. It really makes you feel like you're in a weird dimension. Add on to that the way they implement the wall jumping, the frantic stress created because you have to keep moving as fast as you can, all the while not going too fast in some instances and watching out for Magic Koopa. And then they completely throw the challenge on your head by adding the Spring Mario power-up, which just adds a whole other element of trying to figure out how to bounce your way upwards while making sure you're aiming in the right area. Missing a jump on this thing is so frantic because you can see the ground disappearing beneath you as you jump. And it was such a relief when I made it to a launch star and got to the next segment. The final area was more of a typical platforming challenge. This area here felt more like a Mario Party minigame than anything else, of all things. And I mean that as a compliment. If you're careful and you, well, watch your step, you'll make it to the star. Now I did technically go out of order a bit because before you make it to the Garden Dome, you get to go back to the Gateway Galaxy, which is what you started the game in when you got the first star. At first, when you revisit it, it may seem like there's really nothing there, but if you go to the top and you speak to Rosalina, she'll give you a bunch of story beats that we'll discuss in a later segment, and then a red Luma will offer you a chance to use the red star to try to collect all of the purple coins. The red star is your flying power-up. I think the function here is really cool. Mario is very easy to control and it's very intuitive. I think his outfit is awesome. It's a really unique color scheme and really sticks out. However, and I know I'm not the first person to say this is one of the most underutilized power-ups in the entire franchise. This purple coin collecting mission is fun enough, but it's more like a leisure experience. A chance to practice the flight more than anything else. But the kicker is that you're basically practicing it for nothing, which I find to be a little bit disappointing. I debated covering this star with the purple coin segment, but I felt this one just was its own thing, especially considering it's in the same small galaxy of the first star that we collected. Can I say that I like this one for the vibes, but not really for the objective? Like, its existence is cool, I guess, but it feels more like a tutorial, and I think that's intentional. But I do think it's really cool that once you do get the 100 purple coins, the star you get to collect is red. But I don't want to harp on it too much. I think the 2 stars in Gateway Galaxy serve their purpose. The first one was the first star in the game, which was more or less a tutorial stage. The second one was one of the last stars in the game, and that also served as a tutorial in that very same stage, only this time it was to teach you how to fly. What remains were the 10 stars across the small galaxies that I just went through. And while I'm obviously not going to rank the 120 star objectives, I can say with complete confidence that 9 of those 10 stars would easily be in the top 20 or 30%. Maybe 35%. With the only exception being Honeyclimb Galaxy, which might be a top 50 or 60%. And I think I kind of alluded to this before, but covering these types of games is very difficult to really get a hand on the difficulty curve. I've been kind of going through it the same way I went through Mario Sunshine and even Mario 64, where I complete a stage in its entirety and then move on to the next one. But the reality is, you can jump around to your heart's content. You can move on to the next galaxy as soon as you're able to defeat Bowser, which requires much fewer stars than what I was going for. So while I've been faulting different stages for being too easy or too difficult, the reality is the difficulty curve is dynamic and the discussion is a lot more nuanced. And when you add on to it that I was basically only going through the large galaxies and not including the small galaxies, which are some of the most difficult stars in every one of the domes that they exist in for the most part, it's a key point in the narrative that I think should be addressed. I don't think it necessarily takes anything away from what I said prior. I still think all of the large galaxies that come before Freeze Flame Galaxy are just too easy for a Mario game. And likewise, I still think that even the hardest of what came in the second half of the game was just not hard enough to make me feel like I overcame a good challenge. But with these small galaxies sprinkled throughout, I think it definitely made the experience a lot easier to stomach. But that being said, there are still 16 stars to go in this discussion, and the 10 we are going to cover in the next segment involve the Hungry Lumas and the Green Stars. So let's meet up in the Comet Observatory and discuss those.